The pod is back with the guest that everyone has been asking about. Jeff Ford, man, myth, legend. Jeff is an icon in the international TV business, one of the most respected and liked executives whose career spans all the main UK terrestrial broadcasters and multi-channel as well. Jeff talks about his career in acquisitions.
He said it's nothing to do with luck, it's talent.
Attending international programming markets.
Nips and Nipscom.
As well as the LA screenings.
And I remember then being taken back to my hotel room by some young men.
His glory years at Channel 5.
He died watching one of the mucky movies.
Moving to Ireland.
Obviously the boyfriends were straight round, weren't they? Christ, I didn't it? Anyway.
And the importance of family support.
And my wife said, why didn't you give it a rest?
Here comes Jeff Ford. Hi Jeff, welcome to the pod.
Hello Danny, thank you for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. I think, by popular demand, this is the one that people have been waiting for.
Well, I did send in a lot of letters and hoping you would respond in the positive. So I'm glad you did. Thank you very much for that.
Well, absolute pleasure. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get into the world of telly? I'd
always believed that somebody like a god creature or god character must sort of, put all these programs on the little box in the corner. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. This how they create a schedule or on all these different items from different places around the world. And what really got my sort of interest was all these American shows. And I think I must have been about 8 or 9 at the time. And it's a well-trodden story, I'm afraid, this. But I watched Columbo and I thought, bloody hell. Or not bloody hell, because I was only 8, so I would have said, gosh, or something, and said, I'd love to do that job. That's the sort of job I'd like to do. I love watching old films. I love watching American shows, and I'd love to do that. So from an age of 8, I'd already decided this would be my career path, and so everything I did from there on almost was to become an acquisitions executive. And it was Columbo was the first thing. Prescription Murder with Peter Falk and Gene Barry was the first show that really got me excited in television. And of course it's still being shown today, usually on 5 USA.
So that was the motivation. How did you then go about making it happen?
So I wrote to anybody and everybody. I wrote to Samuelson's, who used to be the big sort of film company who used to sort of service lots of movies, and they came back and wrote back to me saying, "Dear Mr. Bond, Mr. J. Bond, in fact it was, thank you for your letter, but there are no positions for you." And I thought, so actually, although it was a great no, a great doctor no, I actually kept that letter. But the other things I did was I wrote to Leslie Halliwell, who was the ITV film buyer at the time, and an icon who'd written all the Halliwell books, and again, another polite no. And then I wrote to the BBC and sort of said, well, I'd like to become an acquisitions person, and I got a nice polite no. Then I wrote to them saying, well, can I be a cameraman? And, got a nice polite no. But they said, but if you want to be a vaults boy and get cans off a shelf and then send them to Lime Grove or Manchester or whatever, there's a job, down at Windmill Road at the BBC Film Vaults. And I thought, that sounds like an acquisitions executive to me. So I went for this job when I was 18, and I got the job in the Film Vaults. But the great thing was, of course, is part of the archive that they have down there, they had a small amount of tape, but they also had all the movies. So you actually could get involved in actually, saying, oh, guess what I did, Mum and Dad, when I came home at sort of 5:38 on a Friday. I sent A Hard Day's Night off to be transmitted over the weekend. And that absolute excitement of being able to just touch the cans of film that were actually that had Hard Day's Night in, it tingles down my spine. And it was absolutely that love of of movies or being in part of it. And it's funny how it was always just the schedule that attracted me, not in terms of much of the production. It was just the finished item that actually really got me excited. And that's where I went. Of course, working in a film vault, in the dark for most of the time wasn't really the best way of moving on. But so I started then getting a career within the BBC and trying to work my way up. And after about 18 months, I was into my third new job. And then I got stuck there. I got stuck at the BBC in film examination, where I had to watch the Wombles. and things like that, and Camberwick Green, which was not a high point in my career, although I do know all the episodes of Camberwick Green and the Wombles. But then I started sort of trying to get, how do I get out of this department? And they used to have attachments so you could go to other departments. And I got into the purchase programs department, but as a CinemaScope spotter. And what that means is not saying, oh my God, look over there's a CinemaScope film, but it was literally editing down CinemaScope films for 4:3 Academy ratio. So when The Hills Are Alive with the Sound of Music, you had to ensure that you got Julie Andrews not nicely in the centre when the camera used to pan round her and spin round her. Make sure that you were getting Julie Andrews within your 4:3 ratio. So you had to pan and scan within the frame to ensure that you kept her in the middle, which is really a great skill, but obviously not something that people particularly use now because of widescreen television. So I'm glad I didn't go down that route and become an expert in there. But it got me into the acquisitions department at the Beeb. And then I just sort of went from there, worked with Alan Howden, who was the guy in charge of the department. Eventually, I got a couple of attachments there. And then, strangely enough, there was a job at Anglia Television. And I lied and said that I had a full-time job at the BBC in the acquisitions department. And I wore some very nice suede shoes for the interview at Anglia, and the lady gave me a job there. And that's how then I got into ITV, which became, all of a sudden, for 7 or 8 years at the Beeb doing not very much. Within 7 years, I was director of acquisitions at ITV. There was a huge sweep and a huge change. It was unbelievable in terms of how you could move within the ITV regions.
And ITV at that point, still being a regional network, had a sort of a group buying approach, right? And so that must have been an interesting process to be involved in so many people.
I tell you what, Boris Johnson would not have survived. It was a bit like and Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson, they just didn't know they would be taken out on the first week. It was quite a political environment. Everybody's trying to outdo each other as well as getting a great, huge experience, but everybody's trying to outdo each other because, London Weekend and there was Carlton. And, so you had these two very big companies vying for control of the network because they each had 27%, of their national advertising revenue. And therefore they thought they were the important ones. And they would try and dictate to everybody else, and when I say dictate to everybody else, their own employees as well as the other companies. I mean, it was very feisty, but lively, and so there was a lot. It was a great sort of ground or area to experience, And looking back, it wasn't too bad. I think I look at it mostly with fondness. I think that's always a good question to look back at people's lives, how much fondness they have for certain periods of time.
So how did you end up at the newly formed Channel 5?
Well, obviously, when I was at Channel 4, at ITV, I became the network controller of acquisitions. So that was I think I was doing that for about 2.5 years. The thing about, again, I think the part of ITV is that ITV was always driven by their home production. I think Marcus Plantin, the network director, when the overnights came in and share in peak was less than 40%, I think he'd be slightly worried. It was those sort of days. ITV was like a powerhouse of drama. There was not many acquisitions in terms of certainly in peak. You had Baywatch Nights, that sort of shows around the edges. But the movies were the thing that drove it, and I used to buy those as well. But I think after about 2.5 years, I thought, well, Channel 5's just been launched. It's got a movie at 9 o'clock every single night. I've got a huge knowledge of movies, and I love watching films, and I love watching actually TV movies. A terrible thing to say. And I chased Dawn Airy around, I think, for about 2.5 months to say, please, Dawn, I could do that job. I'd really do it well, and you wouldn't be disappointed. And luckily, or whatever, that I don't know, probably other people said no. I luckily got that particular job, and then became director of acquisitions at 5. And of course, having movies at 9 o'clock, driving the schedule, the acquisitions could be front and center, which is a real rarity, and is never going to be the same on a free-to-air television station. Certainly, let's not include digital. I think it's slightly different. But on the Big Five, that was the first one or the last one that was really all about acquisitions. And so I broadened our horizons and not just buying very old movies that were actually okay, but not. I broadened it to buy those cable and TV movies that had a big star in that could actually generate big ratings and cost hardly anything, which was also a really big thing to be able to do.
Dawn very famously described Channel 5 as being about the three Fs: films, football, and something else. You put the F in 5.
Well, I did. The one you're not referring to was yes, because it don't again. This is before the internet or the interweb. Yeah, we did a lot of naughty programs, and it was Red Shoe Diaries with David Duchovny, and nobody had done that sort of thing. So it worked, but it was very bad for the brand. And so although it had huge success, huge numbers, it didn't do well for the brand. And of course, it was one of those films, I think probably with Shannon Tweed in, who is one of my favourites, was when Adam Faith actually was watching Channel 5, and he died watching one of the mucky movies, because he said there's nothing on Channel 5. There's nothing ever on Channel 5, is there? But the film thing was ginormous, and it drove the schedule, and the schedule started really accelerating. And then we broadened it to start buying series. And of course, that's CSI and Law and Order and all that sort of stuff. And then then we moved into Home and Away, buying that, getting that away from ITV. So the schedule starts to build and build and build, but all through acquisitions. And I knew it could only last for a certain period of time, because as all the rest of the schedule built up and people were creating new shows, they would eventually take over. But it was a great period of time. We took the ratings right up to about 6. I think when I left, it was the main channel was 6.7 share. And that was without all the digital channels didn't even exist then. And of course, because I'd worked for Kevin Ligo at 5, because he was director of programs after Dawn, he actually asked me to go to Channel 4. So I left Channel 5 and went to Channel 4 and worked for him.
That gave you the full house of terrestrial networks, because you've done BBC, well, exactly. ITV.
I mean, I didn't do it in the right order, but because I like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But then I obviously miscounted, because I went back to 5 again just to ensure that I'd actually covered it and people would actually understand that I had got all 5 in case they missed the first 5. But no, and it was great working with Kevin. And again, the great thing is, acquisitions have been part of Channel 4's DNA when they were going through in the early 80s and coming through to the noughties. Again, acquisitions were really, really important for them, as either through comedies or their movies. So it was a great place to work, and I'm very happy there with Kevin again. And then that time, it was time again when Dawn went back to Channel 5, and I decided and then she chased me for 2.5 months to come back to work at Channel 5 and say, could you be director of acquisitions, director of digital channels? And so I took on the whole mantle of all that area, which was terrific. And then, of course, RTL sold it to Richard Desmond, and then everybody left. And I think I was the only one standing, apart from Kelly Williams, who was the head of sales and is now obviously ITV. And he made me director of programs, which was an amazing thing, because I never thought I'd ever do that. From that little boy who was 8 years old, watching Columbo and thinking, gosh, I'd love to be able to schedule or buy it and schedule it. And there I am playing with a whole channel. As Charles Dickens said, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times, but it was very good. And I was so pleased that Richard gave me that. If he came in this room now, I'd be surprised, because I have locked the door. But secondly, I would welcome him with open arms, because he did give me the chance to do something that I thought I'd never be able to do. We managed to actually stop the ship, I think, from sinking, because it was actually in a really bad state. And we managed to bring about, stability. And I think it was the first time, I think, for a long time, where people had looked at Channel 5 as being actually not a bad place to come and watch programs. And and Ben's done a fantastic job as well, taking it on from that we stopped everything, and we started moving it back to being an appreciated channel, a set of channels, and something that was coherent, had value, had a brand that people liked. And then I think, and it's moved on from there. So I'll never ever forget my period there, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I said, I'm so lucky. That's the one thing I think is, you have to be talented in life and very lucky. Although Jeffrey Boycott, when I spoke to him about this, he just said to me, he said, it's nothing to do with luck, it's talent.
So the Richard period is obviously one that you have very fond memories of, because it did open that opportunity for you. Quite a controversial figure.
What, me? I wasn't controversial at all. I tried to be a really nice person, but very open arms, looking after my team. Oh, sorry. Oh, you mean Richard? The one thing about Richard is enthusiasm. he said, oh, we should get Big Brother. I said, yeah, I think, do you know what? I think we should get Big Brother because it's now going to be available. Channel 4 have sort of dismissed it. They're going to have this creative renewal. And we needed something that to sort of just go with a big bang. And so actually, when we said, let's go for Big Brother, yes, right then, come on, right, fantastic. Let's do it. So he put his heart and soul into it. What was at the meetings, not all of them, obviously, some of the meetings with Endemol, and really did have such an enthusiasm to ensure that we got the show that we really, really wanted. And of course, it worked, and it did again help with the brand. Although people said, "Oh, it's just a Channel 4 thing," yeah, but we put our Channel 5 marker on it. We got a new host in Brian Dowling when he came along and did that. Huge ratings for us, big marketing push. Again, people saw us in a slightly different light.
So you left 5 and then moved to abroad for the first time, I guess, in your working career, as kind of sort of a job swap. It wasn't really a job swap with Ben Frau, but in a way,
in a way, it became that, I suppose. And it's that shorthand for it. I decided that I think I'd probably got a little bit tired after working sort of getting on for nearly 2.5 years, I think, as director of programs. And my wife said, "Why don't you give it a rest? Let's open up a bed and breakfast, welcome people in." And then, of course, as soon as I stopped, then, obviously Ben moved across was going to move to 5. And then I got a call from Ireland saying, well, would you like to come over here? And I thought, do you know what? Why not? It's got to be okay, isn't it? I thought it's got to be okay. So I went. It's funny. It's because, why do you go when you're 50? What was it, 51 or something? Why do you make things difficult for yourself? Why do you emigrate? Why do you leave your 2 daughters in tears at the airport?
Tears of joy, presumably.
Well, obviously, that's probably the reason I left. Tears of joy. And obviously the boyfriends were straight round, weren't they? Christ, I'm right, didn't it? Anyway. And so why did I do that? And I thought, no, maybe I still want to do another job. Maybe I still, and I was tired after 2.5 years with 5 that second time. If I was really honest with myself, I probably shouldn't have gone. I should have actually stayed at Channel 5, and I should have disobeyed my good lady wife as opposed to agreeing with her. And I think it would have been I think I would have had a better time, because I think Richard and I had got to a point where we were really, really comfortable. We both knew each other. He worked his way through how media works, and he had an enormous amount of trust for me with me. So I had an enormous amount of trust with him or for him. And so therefore, I probably now looking back, and it's a great 2020 vision, all that sort of stuff. Probably shouldn't have gone. Saying that, I launched a soap which I'd never done before in Red Rock, which then was on BBC. All these new shows that we created. ITV were going to take all the ITV shows away from TV3, but actually we managed to secure lots of shows that weren't through ITV, and we managed to buy lots of different things from different suppliers. And actually, we did very well. We opened a studio complex. We started doing light entertainment shows in our own studio. Very difficult time, but actually, again, really rewarding. The reason I left Ireland in the end was that my daughter started having children. And my wife said, well, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going back to England. And so I thought, right, I suppose that means I better go back then, didn't it? I suppose, really, because the grandchildren were appearing. So I left. Luckily, the station was TV3 was in great health. Anyway, then I came to Fox as MD and thinking, well, it's nice. It's a nice company, and never worked for Murdoch. Obviously, after I worked for Desmond Murdoch, and I thought, well, I'm doing another one here. That was great fun, and as well as looking after the channels, then they wanted to start commissioning drama for Europe. And then I started doing, proper big mainstream drama. And, the first one we did was Deep State with Mark Strong. And that was a huge success for us. And then I sort of, just before I left, I managed to sort of work through on getting a deal for War of the Worlds over the line, which also was a huge success right across Europe as well, and for the Fox channels. And so I thought, sort of, after 40 years, and then sort of all of a sudden you turn around, and this is the funny thing. Because when I first went to Cannes, the MIPS and MIPCOM, you think, look at all these old dinosaurs. Look at them all. I'm the young buck, and you're the old dinosaurs. And then I think MIP asked me to write a piece on 25th anniversary or 50th anniversary. I can't remember which one it was now. And I think it was the 50th. It must have been 50th. And I wrote that exactly saying, when I first got here, I was the young buck in a world full of dinosaurs. Now I'm the dinosaur in a world full of young bucks. And it's strange how you look back up and your life just whizzes past. I'm so lucky. The places I've seen, the friends I have as well out of the media business is absolutely unbelievable. And and the close relationships I have with some of these people, and they are my best friends.
So would you change anything?
I never really say this to anybody, but I think I would have stayed at Channel 5. Viacom may well have said, "Thank you, Jeff, you're going," or because now you're getting on a bit or whatever. But who knows what would have happened? I was in the best position ever, and I was just very tired. I had to just make that decision about, should I go, should I stay? And I think, I blame my wife. I totally no. It was the right thing to do at the time, but maybe looking back, I think I should have stayed.
Were there any jobs that you turned down over the years that you think?
Oh yeah, none I turned down that I regret. I don't think, but so I don't think. They say I've certainly turned down jobs. Should I say, BBC and all that sort of stuff. You turn those down, and mainly that's all about money, because it would be the prestige of being not director of programs, obviously, director of acquisition. Sorry, for the Beeb is a hugely prestigious thing, but I was in a different mindset, different place.
And American, did anybody ever ask you to come to the States, either as on the broadcast side or on the distribution side?
No, it's strange enough. No, I don't think that. No, I think it was because I'm not really a production person. Obviously, on distribution, and I know, Danny, that's part of your part of your life. But I never really fancied it. But go that whole thing of going from being a buyer to a seller. And I think I would have missed the overnights too much. So I think probably if you're looking at sort of what was the best time of my career, I think it just in terms of happiness, let's say happiness, I think that's happiness is very underrated. You can talk about success, but I think happiness is really important. It was that first time at Channel 5, which was 97 through to 2005. And I can remember getting on the train with my, you do get on the train and commute into London every day, that hour journey. And my friend I used to go with, who's an animator, Graham Ralph, BAFTA award-winning. I have to say that whenever you mention his name. He always used to be so annoyed with me because I was so happy in going into work, because it was all one team, all trying to do the same thing and succeeding against all the odds. And everybody used to hate us for it because we were so bloody good and so successful. And it wasn't the individual success; it was about group success, and it was great. Anyway, that's the Brownlows of an old man.
Was there ever a standout MIP or MIPCOM or even an LA screenings where you look back and think, wow, that was a crazy period?
Well, I think there's lots of crazy periods, Danny, which was mainly all of the MIPs, all the MIPCOMs. I was lucky or unlucky for the LA screenings as well. I had my birthday, always had my birthday in LA. And I was with my 50th. We had this huge do at Jeffrey Schlesinger's house, up in the Hollywood Hills. And he usually has a dinner where, lots of people come in from all around the world. He gets some big names in, big producers, a couple of actors, and they talk about what they're doing. And after that event, they took all the sort of tables away and then brought out new tables, and a whole new lot of guests arrived to celebrate my 50th birthday, which was an amazingly kind thing. Mind you, I think I'd probably spent about $200 million that year with Warner Brothers, so it probably wasn't that kind. But it was a wonderful thing to be able for him to do, and he is such a great guy, he really was. And we had this great party, and it went on through the night. And I remember then being taken back to my hotel room by some young men. And then they tried to hang me out the window on the first floor of the Peninsula Hotel, which luckily they didn't, because they were so drunk they probably would have killed me. But they were all very highly ranked people, and they are still in the employment of the television industry, and therefore their names must remain for the time being a secret.
I think one of them may have even been on this podcast already.
Well, I'm not going to say. I can't say. But it's things like, then I used to go to the Super Bowl every year. I mean, how did that happen? That's what I still ask myself.
How did that happen? It was nothing to do with you.
I think I was just a good tourist. I think that was the whole thing. No, we because Channel 5 used to show the Super Bowl. I used to get part of the group who used to go along with the director of sport, because we used to broadcast from there. Like John Barnes used to go along because he used to do his bit from there, and it was unbelievable. And so you look back and you go, my God, I'm so lucky to have all these things happen.
What role does karaoke play in the acquisitions market?
Karaoke is a really important. I'm glad you brought this up because I think it's an important element of any MIP or MIPCOM. Yes, again, this is another big thing that I got involved in with Howard Littman, Debbie McDonald, or Debbie Church, as she was then, for Nickelodeon. And we used to have karaoke on the last night, or the night before we also go home. And it was some of the most ridiculous things. We used to go to the Bangkok, which is now it doesn't do karaoke anymore. And I probably wonder why. And Mr. Tui, who used to be there, he was in charge and he used to love it. And he used to take the microphone. He's one of these people who used to think, is he laughing or was he just he just hate us? And I couldn't really quite work out which way it was. One night, quite early on, the guys who used to work at Beta were on other tables, and of course he had all these Brits on one side singing karaoke, and then the Beta boys, who they became known as, then wanted to also join in, and so we used to then swap the microphone between the two big groups of tables. And one year, the Beta boys, who obviously they could never hold a candle to us because we were so good.
Who's with? The three of you, or was this?
By that time there were about 40 people going along. It got ridiculous, and everybody had a sing song, and it was lovely. But the Beta boys, because obviously they couldn't deal with us, they actually came with a dance routine. We were just not worthy that year. They were so good, but it was again. It's this whole thing of enjoyment, people, fun, and that coming together, which I do absolutely miss. And it's terrible to look back and say that is never going to happen again. And Howard lives on an island in Scotland now. So it's a strange world how we all disappear or dissipate or diss something or other, or go to diss maybe in Norfolk or Suffolk, Norfolk Southern borders. I loved the silliness of it all.
If I was to ask you for three of your buys, three of your acquisitions, what would be the best three buys? What was the one that got away? And what was the one that you wish had gone away? And I'm anticipating that CSI is going to be in there, and Joey's going to be in there, and you can choose where they sit.
Well, I think yeah. Look, I mean, CSI is the.
Did that make you, Jeff?
I think it made the channel, and I think therefore because it made the channel, it sort of by default. I wouldn't say made me. I think we're all. I think possibly, yeah, okay, possibly it did make the reputation, but I think it is all about that buy, because it changed the channel's perception of the channel and the channel's fortunes, and it was therefore it opened the doors for us to be able to buy more American shows. So in a way, I suppose that one was probably the most important. I think Home and Away, which I have mentioned, I think was important because it became a pillar for the early evening. And nobody would ever thought that we'd actually get something from ITV, and we did. And that was an amazing deal with Kathy Payne, and absolutely wonderful. And probably, and I'm really struggling because, as I said, it's hard to try and remember what you bought, but probably Big Bang in some ways. I think, but again, about pleasure as well, because it was not a show that I think was expected to do anything, and not expected to be that successful. Or people, I know it's Chuck Lorre, I know that, but it was where does it sit? And it became obviously a huge mainstay of Channel 4, and particularly obviously E4. And so it means something. And I think that's the thing. And also, to be honest, all the film deals, because you and I did a deal together, I think that was extremely interesting, where we took out the Sky window, and that at the time was a very important deal, probably more for Sony than for us. No, I'm just joking. It was hugely important for us, and it included Terminator 3.
We were ahead of the game.
We're ahead of the game. You see, we thought different ways. I can't even think any ways these days. But it was getting out the Sky window, a few more runs, a few more years, and it did something for you because it showed something that you want. It gave you something you wanted, which was another outlet, and it gave us something we wanted, which was new films in advance of Sky that were really important. Strange enough, other things that I bought, and I'll be very quick on this, which I think looking back now are important. Con Air and all the big movies like that at the time, when Channel 5 were launching, they were getting 5 million viewers, and they did get 5 million viewers. But things that people had actually said you can't transmit anymore. And strange enough, like Rambo, which people said you can't transmit anymore because of Hungerford, and people won't even know what Hungerford was now. But it's when a guy came down and shot lots of people, and they thought he was a bit like Rambo, and BBC didn't want to transmit Rambo anymore, and we decided that actually we'd admit Rambo, and that did like 3-4 million people. Those sort of things where you buck the trend of thinking that you can't do that. Actually, we said no, we can do that. So sometimes it doesn't actually say it's a program. It could be a set of films, or it could be the way you approach a deal. And I think that's what makes it different, and that's what I think that's what also helped with the channel.
And the one that got away. What about The Simpsons? That was interesting period.
Well, I think the one that got The Simpsons got away for a lot of people. You know, got away from Channel 5. But I think you always lose stuff, and at the end of the day, there was a lot of money involved. And you've already mentioned the J word, Joey, which was
very good demos, I believe.
Oh, hey, listen, can I just say? I just want to say now, Joey, right, with Matt LeBlanc, the spin-off from Friends, still the highest-rated Channel 5 film in the 8 o'clock hour on a Sunday for 1634s.
Say no more.
What more do you want to know? I don't want to know anymore. It's still, I think it averaged about 2.5 million across its run, but it was not the powerhouse that we wanted it to be. It was not the Frasier to Cheers, shall we say, if we're talking in old parlance and old money.
In old money, yeah.
It's something for people to look on the internet for. This is a good trip down bloody memory lane more than anything else. But yes, it wasn't that. It was one of those ones that everybody says never do a spin-off. It still did okay, and I still get ribbed about it by all my friends all the time.
Well, if you had the big up for CSI, you've got to take the Joey. The Joey comes with the CSI.
Yeah, look, and you know, we can't get it right, and that all the time. And I think that's part of growing up. And you know, in any walk of life, you're always going to get disappointments, and you always make mistakes. And I'm not saying Joey's a mistake. Please, Warner Brothers, please, that wasn't a mistake. You learn by what you do, and that's part and parcel of, you know, going to LA and trying to buy the right show and not listen to the hype, which we all have done in the past. And you try and say, no, where's this going? Where's it going to sit? How can it last more than 13 episodes? That's how it is.
So it's around about this time in the podcast that I ask my guests.
After 4 hours of podcast interview, yeah.
Eventually comes to the point of lockdown book, movie,
yes.
box set,
yes.
and album,
yes.
as I used to know them.
Yes.
So
I didn't know what you meant, album.
I thought it might have been your era.
Well, you mean
maybe before that you were only you're more a kind of 78 kind of guy.
Well, I do have a 78 player, but I do have sort of, you know, 8-track. Mainly, I'm an 8-track man, or cassette. But I could have gone CD if I really going to get modern. Long player, obviously, is the another
technical term.
But so in terms of, shall we go book first?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting one for me, because my lockdown book is actually called The Beatles 100 Songs Ukulele Chord Songbook, because while during lockdown I started to learn to play the ukulele. When the lockdown started, I thought, God, what am I going to do? You know, in the lockdown period, because I want to learn a new skill. So I decided to try my hand at the ukulele. So again, my wife Tracy and I have been knocking a few tunes out. It's a really interesting instrument. It's quite easy. There's only four strings, obviously, so it's really nice. It's not too difficult. But that was the book I had all through my lockdown experience. In terms of a movie, it's strange. I watched A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which is the Tom Hanks film about the TV presenter Fred Rogers. It's a very emotional, very heartfelt, uplifting film. Quite small in its story and its telling, but beautifully played by everybody. And because of its uplifting nature, I think was the perfect sort of antidote for lockdown. Box set, well, yes. Well, this one, I changed it because I actually changed it to something I did actually watch all through lockdown. And I think I watched it twice. And there's 100 episodes, and it's Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's always 2 episodes a night. That's sort of 50 days before you start. So having it twice, that's 100 days. So that's getting on for proper lockdown. That's good. That's good for lockdown. And absolutely brilliant. You know, Larry David, this character that he's created, which is half real, half not real, or whatever it is, was just an absolute delight to be there and watch and inhabit. And the ensemble cast, great show, and so funny and so wrong. Album. Now, Danny, I think I have to take total issue with you on this. because there is no such thing anymore, as in my eyes. I'm wider. I'm wider than this. My life is broad. So I started listening to a group called Cigarettes After Sex. It was a really interesting sound. You don't quite know if the lead singer is male or female. He has that sort of unique blend, and I really enjoyed listening to their playlist. And then I got a playlist that is associated with that group, and so people like Angel Olsen, Surf Jan Stevens, and strangely enough, Cocteau Twins are on there, and so are the Smiths, Faye Webster, Lana Del Rey. I'm not so easy. Easy listening is not the right word, because easy listening is a different type of music, but it's quite melancholic at times. It's perfect for the mood of the times, but also perfect for my mood. And it doesn't upset you. It doesn't drive you mad, but it feels like it fits, and it fits in whatever I'm doing. It works for me in so many different ways.
I'll check that out and make sure that I clear my internet browser history afterwards.
It does sound slightly odd, but it absolutely. And the great thing is, so I think the thing of it is, if you're always discovering. I think in terms of everything that I've done is discover whatever, tried to discover things that I've gone on, and then still discover. And I think that's great. It's a great way for using apps and just on Spotify or whatever to try and to continue to broaden, even if it's that musical instrument or learning French, of course, which I'm doing now, and I'm never going to go to bloody France again. But anyway, it's continuing to broaden your horizons, learning new things. I think is the best medicine for you, particularly this time.
Well, Jeff Ford, lovely to chat. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. It was great to hear some of those stories, and I think, if nothing else, it's lovely to hear about karaoke in MIPCOM, karaoke in Cannes, that it's lived before, and hopefully it can live again, and hopefully you'll be able to join in at some point in the future.
I hope so, if I'm not decrepit, which people have always said I am. No, but listen, Dan, it's been thank you very much for inviting me, and it's been great fun, and I'll let you get to bed.